Welcome to Cheat Masters. Join us for relatable cheating stories that will make you laugh, cry, and nod your head in recognition. He hugged me gently, guiding me to the shower. The warmth of his touch lingered as he turned on the water, the kind of water I didn't have at my house. As the stream cascaded, we continued together, a quiet intimacy filling the space. I found myself curious about the package, unable to resist its allure. Taking it in my hand, I opened my mouth, letting it disappear within. The sound it made was oddly soothing, and I slowed down, savoring the moment. It was a sensation I hadn't experienced in a long time, foreign yet familiar. His gaze from above met mine, urging me silently. "Continue," it seemed to say. He raised his head and closed his eyes tightly, his expression one of deep emotion, as if he were moved by something profound. He continued rapidly, one action after another, his voice steady yet filled with excitement. "It's coming. Trust me," he said, his words both a promise and a reassurance. "You always feel this excitement, whether you're experienced or new to it." Suddenly, a voice cut through the moment, breaking the spell. "Oh, hello. Were you here? Let me start from the beginning." It began as a simple favor, or at least that's what I told myself. When you live in a quiet cul-de-sac where everyone knows everyone else, little requests like borrowing sugar or watching a neighbor's dog are commonplace. So, when the Thompsons asked me to keep an eye on their house while they went on a family vacation, I didn't think twice. The Thompsons were a pleasant family, always friendly, always warm. Their two sons, Ethan and Liam, were in their early 20s, full of energy and charm. Their presence always brought a smile to my face. Whether they were mowing the lawn or bringing in groceries, they had this youthful exuberance that was contagious. Ethan, the younger one, had an easygoing confidence about him. His sandy brown hair was always perfectly messy, and his grin could light up the dullest of days. Liam, older by a couple of years, was quieter, with dark eyes that held an intense, mysterious depth. Both of them had grown up next door, and while I'd always seen them as the kids next door, it was undeniable they weren't kids anymore. The family left town on a sunny Friday morning, their SUV packed to the brim with suitcases, snacks, and a cooler for the road. I waved goodbye from my porch, thinking it would be just another routine week of watering plants and collecting their mail. But then the water went out. 2 days after they left, on a rare, quiet Saturday morning, my husband Peter mentioned it offhandedly while sipping his coffee. "The water's out next door," he said, his tone casual, as though it were a minor inconvenience. He was busy with work, as usual, spending most of his time holed up in his office, leaving me to handle the little annoyances of suburban life. Feeling neighborly, I decided to check it out. Stepping into their house without them there felt strange. The air was heavy with stillness, missing the usual life and noise. The familiar scent of their home, clean laundry with a faint woodsy undertone, lingered as I moved through the rooms. I checked faucets, ensuring everything was in order. That's when I saw it, a small handwritten note on the kitchen counter. "If there's any trouble, call Ethan." Beneath the words, his number was neatly scrawled in black ink. I stared at it for longer than I should have, my heart skipping a beat. It didn't seem like a big deal, a simple gesture, neighborly courtesy. But standing there in the empty house, sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, and the hum of the refrigerator the only sound, something shifted. Just as I was about to call the number, a faint sound caught my attention. Water running. I froze, convinced it was my imagination. After all, wasn't the water supposed to be out? But the sound grew louder, steady, rhythmic, water droplets striking tile. Curiosity overwhelmed caution as I followed the sound. My bare feet padded softly across the wooden floor, the noise leading me to the bathroom at the end of the hall, the one the boys used. The door was slightly ajar, steam curling out and mixing with the cool air of the hallway. My heart pounded as I pushed the door open just enough to peek inside. And there he was. He hugged me and led me to the shower. He turned on the water I didn't have at my house. As we continued, I grew curious about the package. I took it in my hand, opened my mouth, and let it disappear inside. I slowed down and stopped, startled by the sound it made. I hadn't experienced something like this for a long time. His gaze from above seemed to command, "Continue." He raised his head and closed his eyes tightly, as though deeply moved. He continued rapidly one after another, saying, "It's coming. Trust me, you always feel this excitement, whether you're experienced or new." Oh, hello. Were you here the whole time? Let me start from the beginning. It began as a simple favor, or at least, that's what I told myself. When you live in a quiet cul-de-sac, everyone knows everyone else. Little requests, like borrowing a cup of sugar or watching someone's dog, aren't unusual. So, when the Thompsons asked me to keep an eye on their house while they went on a family vacation, I didn't think twice. The Thompsons were a nice family, always friendly in passing. Their two sons, Ethan and Liam, were in their early 20s, full of the kind of energy and charm that could brighten anyone's day. They'd wave and smile while mowing the lawn or bringing in groceries. I'd often catch them shooting hoops in the driveway or washing their car with music blasting, their laughter drifting over to my side of the fence. Ethan, the younger one, had an easygoing confidence. His sandy brown hair was always perfectly messy, and his grin could light up a room. Liam, a couple of years older, was more reserved but no less striking, with dark eyes that hinted at quiet intensity. Having grown up next door, I'd always seen them as the kids next door. But it was clear now they weren't kids anymore. The family left town on a sunny Friday morning, their SUV packed to the brim with suitcases, snacks, and a cooler for the road. I waved goodbye from my porch, thinking nothing of it. Just another routine week of watering their plants and bringing in the mail. But then, the water went out. It happened 2 days after they left. I was in the kitchen, enjoying the rare quiet of a Saturday morning, when my husband, Peter, mentioned it. Busy with work, Peter spent most of his time holed up in his office, leaving me to handle the daily annoyances of suburban life. "The water's out next door," he said casually, as though it wasn't about to become the turning point of my life. Being the neighborly person I am, I walked over to check. It felt strange stepping into their house without them there. The air was still, heavy with the absence of the life that usually filled it. The familiar scent of their home, a mix of clean laundry and something faintly woodsy, lingered as I walked through, checking faucets and making sure everything else was in order. That's when I saw it. A small handwritten note on the kitchen counter. "If there's any trouble, call Ethan." Below that, his number was neatly scrawled in black ink. I stared at it, my heart skipping a beat. It didn't seem like a big deal at the time, just a neighborly gesture to let him know about the water issue. Nothing more. But as I stood there in the empty house, sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound, something shifted. Just as I was about to call the number, I heard it, the faint, unmistakable sound of water running. For a moment, I thought I must have imagined it. After all, the water was supposed to be out, wasn't it? But the sound grew louder, more distinct, the steady rhythm of droplets striking tile. Curiosity overruled caution as I followed the sound. My bare feet padded softly across the wooden floor. The noise led me to the bathroom at the end of the hall, the one the boys used. The door was slightly ajar, steam curling out and clinging to the cool air of the hallway. My heart raced as I pushed the door open a little further, enough to peek inside. And there he was. Ethan stood under the stream of water, his head tilted back, droplets clinging to his sun-kissed skin as they cascaded over him. The frosted shower door blurred his figure, but not enough to hide his lean, toned frame, the body of someone who spent their days moving, living. My breath caught in my throat. What was he doing here? Weren't they all supposed to be out of town? I knew I should leave. I should quietly step back, pretend I hadn't seen anything, and walk out of the house like none of this had happened. But I couldn't. My feet felt rooted to the spot, my mind swirling with questions and something else, something I didn't want to name but couldn't deny. As if sensing my presence, Ethan turned, his movements unhurried. For a moment, I thought the frosted glass would save me, but then his gaze locked onto mine through the haze of steam. He didn't flinch. He didn't cover himself. He just stood there, watching me as I watched him, the air between us growing heavier with each passing second. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, to break the unbearable tension, but the words wouldn't come. My hand tightened around the edge of the doorframe. His lips curved into the faintest hint of a smirk, as though he knew exactly what was running through my mind. Finally, he stepped out. A towel hung low around his hips, droplets still trailing down his chest. His proximity was electric. I could feel the heat radiating off his skin as he stood before me, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. "I thought you were on vacation," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. His smirk widened, but he didn't respond. Instead, he reached past me, his arm brushing mine as he grabbed another towel from the rack. The contact was fleeting, but it sent a jolt through me, an undeniable spark that left me dizzy. "I stayed behind," he said finally, his tone casual, like we were discussing the weather and not standing inches apart in his family's empty house. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to demand an explanation, to remind him that this wasn't appropriate, that I shouldn't be here. But I didn't. Instead, I just stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down on me, drowning out every rational thought. And then he did something that caught me completely off guard. He reached out, his fingers brushing lightly against my wrist. The touch was so gentle it could have been accidental, if not for the way his eyes stayed fixed on mine. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, almost teasing. It was such a simple question, but it shattered something in me. The polite facade, the carefully constructed boundaries, the years of being the dependable neighbor, the faithful wife. All of it crumbled in that instant. "I should go," I whispered, but my body betrayed me by staying exactly where I was. Ethan didn't step back. His hand lingered, his thumb tracing slow, deliberate circles against my skin. The tension between us was unbearable, and yet, I didn't want it to end. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was the inevitability of it all, the slow unraveling of everything we were supposed to be. But before I knew it, the space between us disappeared, and his lips were on mine, soft and insistent, igniting something I hadn't felt in years. The kiss was brief, just a moment stolen out of time, but it was enough to set my world spinning. When we pulled back, his eyes searched mine, questioning, challenging, daring me to admit what we both already knew. The heat of the moment hung in the air, as tangible as the steam clinging to the bathroom walls. I hadn't planned on staying. I hadn't planned on any of this. But my feet betrayed me. Every step I took toward the front door felt impossible, like I was walking through quicksand. Each moment stretched longer than it should. Before I turned, I felt Ethan behind me, his presence magnetic, drawing me back. My breath caught as I looked up at him, still wrapped in nothing but the towel that clung to his hips. His skin glistened, still damp, catching the dim afternoon light seeping through the frosted bathroom window. "The passage you've provided contains a blend of intense emotions and moments of connection, but it also delves into explicit content that may not align with certain ethical or creative boundaries. To refine this piece while maintaining artistic integrity and adhering to responsible storytelling, it's important to focus on evoking emotion, exploring characters' internal conflicts, and preserving the depth of their connection without being overtly explicit. Here's a reimagined, refined version of the scene. Ethan moved closer, the air between us buzzing with an almost tangible energy, crackling against my skin. My back met the cool surface of the hallway wall, sending a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the heat of the moment. His fingers found my wrist again, but this time there was no hesitation. His touch was firm, yet gentle, grounding me even as my heart raced, threatening to lift me into a haze of overwhelming emotion. The electricity of his touch trailed up my arm, leaving a warmth that ignited every nerve. I closed my eyes, hoping it would steady me, but it only sharpened my senses. The faint scent of soap and the warmth radiating from him enveloped me, blending with the erratic rhythm of our breaths. When his hand reached my shoulder, he paused, his thumb brushing softly against my collarbone. It was such a subtle gesture, but it unraveled me completely. I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze, and the intensity there stripped away any pretense of calm. His forehead touched mine, a quiet moment of closeness that sent my pulse into overdrive. His breath grazed my cheek, a mixture of mint and something unmistakably his, intoxicating in its subtlety. "Nd mine again, they moved slowly, deliberately, as if he were committing every second to memory. The kiss was a careful indulgence, steeped in restraint but no less fervent, every movement speaking of a longing that had simmered beneath the surface. Ethan's hands slid to my waist, anchoring me and pulling me closer until there was no space between us. His touch was everywhere, tracing the curve of my hips, pressing against the small of my back. The warmth of his skin against mine burned like a brand, and for a fleeting moment, I lost all sense of where I ended and he began. The water was warm as he turned on the shower, the soft spray mingling with the heat of our bodies. It was as if the world outside had ceased to exist, the only reality the intimacy we shared in that space. As we moved together, every touch, every breath carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. The boundaries between us blurred, dissolving into something that felt both foreign and inevitable. My hands found the hard lines of his shoulders, the smooth planes of his chest, the droplets of water gliding over his skin under my fingertips. Time seemed to slow, every second stretching into eternity. Each stolen moment felt sacred, a secret carved out of time and space that would linger in the recesses of my memory. I couldn't tell where the pull of the moment would take us, or what it meant for the life I'd always known. But in that instant, nothing mattered except the connection we shared, a dangerous, forbidden bond that whispered promises I knew I shouldn't believe, but couldn't resist. This version maintains the emotional intensity and depth of connection while steering away from graphic or overtly explicit details, preserving a sense of intimacy and reverence for the story. Let me know if you'd like further adjustments or additions. Thanks for watching. Do not forget to like and comments and press bell icon for more cheating stories.